maybe we should limit player props in college sports. I don't know.
I was the exact same way. Think that this was going to make it better. Sportsbook is going to do that. Legalization brings it aboard. 7-8 years later, it's really close to whether this is a net positive.
Welcome back to another edition of the Business of Betting podcast. I'm your host, senior analyst at InGame. My name is Jeff Edelstein. I'm joined today by ESPN's David Purdum. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
Listen, before we get started here, I just want to say that I knew you were going to come complete with the cap with, is that a Kaggle? I don't even know what it is, but you're always looking sharp with it, right? I figured I had to, for those of you watching on video, I had a one-up here. I had to go with my Hawaiian print shirt, keep the fashion sense.
I am not lucky enough to have those gracious locks that you have on top of your head, so I don't get to have different haircuts. I just wear hats.
Oh, brother. I mean, you should have seen me 30 years ago. I was, my hair was long and flowing, and what a time to be alive. What a time to be alive. All right, listen, man, I've been covering this industry for about 5 years now, and I feel like I've lived through 2 or 3 different lifetimes with it. You've been covering this industry since 2008. I have to imagine you feel like you've lived through, 12 or 15 lifetimes.
Indeed. I think we've gone through the era of offshore, which was 2008 to 2018. In between there, we got the era of daily fantasy and all of that. Then we get to legalized sports betting, and now we're living through the prediction market era. So yes, several eras.
Yeah, you forgot sweepstakes. Don't forget sweepstakes. There was a blip, right? There was in there. I'm also, as a journalist, and I am gonna ask you some journalism questions here today because I'm curious about your take. But what really jumps out at me is that I feel like the journalism industry as a whole is reactive. Okay, it's just who we are. But you were proactive. You decided in 2008 to say goodbye to print and head over to ESPN. What did you see from a journalist perspective and like where print was headed, but kind of more importantly, B, from like the gambling perspective? Because still in 2008, obviously there was gambling, but it was not on the tip of everybody's tongue like it is today. So I'm like the two-step there. What made you decide to leave, traditional journalism to go to digital? And why gambling? And what did you see that others in the field missed?
Luck, pretty much. In 2008, I was working for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I had always been a traditional newspaper reporter and editor. At that time, 2008, I was getting ready to have my daughter, and the newspaper industry, as everybody knows, was starting to experience regression, serious layoffs all the time. I got nervous. I was like, oh gosh, I'm getting ready to have a kid. I need to make sure I have some sort of backup income. And so I started freelancing and at covers.com. And at the beginning, it was odds to win the SEC, Super Bowl odds, very basic, generic. I think they paid me like $25 a story. It was very basic. But when I started doing that, I found some of the stories when I started calling the bookmakers and the bettors, and that were fascinating. And I loved to write about them. And then B, I started noticing, to your point, that nobody was really writing about the business of betting at that time. It was more about picks, predictions. It was mostly touts covering it. There was really nobody taking a journalistic reporting approach. And I was a much more savvy journalist than I was a bettor, certainly. I didn't want to come out and try to act like these are the picks you're going to make. I did write prediction for college football. That was my favorite sport at the time. But I always wanted to make sure, hey, I'm not an expert. I don't win. And I'm more of a writer, a journalist. And so that's how my approach to it was. And it was a niche. Nobody was doing that at the time. It was all predictions and picks and touts.
What made ESPN, did you pitch, in the end, did ESPN come to you? Did you go to ESPN? How did that marriage come to be?
I joined ESPN in 2014. Chad Millman, who was their kind of betting writer, he was the only one writing about betting at that time for ESPN. He got promoted up to a high level, I think he was vice president of content. And he and I had crossed paths because we were both covering the same industry. And he had reached out about a couple stories that I had done. One was with a famed sports bettor, Billy Walters. I got an interview with him and he reached out to me and said, hey, that's a great get. Good job. And I remember that. And then there was a second one about a guy named Incarcerated Bob. I don't know if anybody ever knows him from Twitter fame, but he was one of those tout con artist guys, fabricated tickets and stories just to get attention. And I kind of dug in on him as more of an example of stuff that happens in the sports betting industry. And Chad noticed that, eventually brought me on in 2014. And now I'm entering my 12th year at ESPN.
This industry, I come from the newspaper background myself. I was a newspaper columnist for 25 years. There were days when I was like, man, what am I going to write about? And this industry, well, there's still those days. If everybody in this industry was given like the slightest dose of truth serum or perhaps psychedelics and allowed themselves to talk, we could go literally probably the rest of our careers and then some without running out of things to write about. I was lucky enough to get an invite to the blackjack ball last year. I had an awesome time, and it was a whirlwind. I was in and out of Vegas in 24 hours, and I was at the ball for about 5 hours, and I got a pretty good story out of it. But I'm sitting there, people are pointing out, that's him, that's her, that's him, that's him. And I'm like, there are 100 books, 100 stories, but nobody talks in this business. That's the biggest issue.
There are so many characters, and the ones who will talk to you, gosh, it sure was a muse for me in my writing. When I started talking to them and learning and hearing their stories, it was incredible. I will give you a little tip. I don't know if you know this, at last year's Blackjack Fall, there was a Jeopardy champion there.
I spoke with him, actually, but he would not go on record.
He's the second one, right? Because we had Jeopardy James for a few years ago, who is also a professional sports bettor and Jeopardy champion. I always thought that was interesting, where they come from.
Even the stories that come out, I'm quite confident are, the cliche tip of the iceberg of what the stories, could possibly be. It really is a fascinating industry. I'm going to ask you another, I was going to say this for later, but I'm going to ask you now a journalism question, journalist to journalist here. What's your thoughts on AI? Because Mike Pesca, who runs The Gist for, he has a Substack that used to be with the NPR. He wrote something the other day that really cracked me up. He said it's practically a union requirement to be anti-AI if you're a journalist, And I think, again, just to me, at least, it goes, I have a positive take on AI, but it goes to the reactive nature of this industry. So I'm just curious, what is your take on AI and its use in journalism?
I use it. I certainly use it for my story structure to, hey, I want to make this a little more intriguing. And I use it. I don't necessarily copy and paste for sure, but I'll get ideas from it. That sounds a little bit better. I like where they're going with that. Sometimes I'll say, I'd like to make this tighter, a little more concise, and they'll find words that I think. And, some people may think that that's against the rules, but why? It's an editor. Why do I want my draft before it goes to my editor, who makes my changes, to use all the resources I have to make it as polished, as tight, as intriguing, get the tension in those stories the best I can. And I think it's, it would be foolish for a writer not to use it, or at least as something to bounce somebody. It's another editor. It's something to bounce something off of, in my opinion.
That makes it. So now there's two of us that are in the industry that are willing to say it out loud. I look at it myself as a very, a more intelligent than me assistant. You know what I'm saying? Like if Vanity Fair hired me to be a staff writer, I'd have an assistant, doing like the research for me. I have somebody even better.
It's a great starting point for research too, right? Go ahead and start that. And then you start seeing the different resources. Then you dig into those studies that it cited. It's a great starting point as well. So
my favorite use right now for it is I always love looking, and again, this is going back to pre-sports betting days, covering the industry, looking at academic studies about this, that, or the other thing. And like, how could I twist this into something? And reading an academic study pre-AI, it was a day-long affair. My eyes would bleed. I'd daydream. I wouldn't know what the hell I'm looking at. And I undoubtedly would miss 90% of it. Now I take a 90-page academic study, bring it over to ChatGPT, say, tell me what I need. I want to write about sports betting. Tell me, what do I need to pull out of this? It's like bing, 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 bing. And then what a tool. It's a fantastic starting point. All right, let's talk about an endpoint. Prediction markets. You have, again, nobody knows what's going to happen. I grant you that. But again, you have been watching this industry longer than anybody, almost, right? What do you think is going to happen? Where do you think it's all going to end up? This is like, obviously, I ask this question to everybody at this point because it's the only thing anyone ever talks about. So I figure I might as well get everyone's opinion on it.
I mean, I think it's destined for the Supreme Court, and I think it's very, very close on what they decide. I don't think you can discount the influence that the current administration has. When they seem to want something, they find ways to get it done. If I had to make odds, I would make the prediction markets being able to offer sports markets a slight favorite in the next 5 years. Now, if that comes about, I do not think that this boom of prediction markets is going to last. I think we'll follow the UK's environment and evolution of theirs, where they've had Betfair, right, for a long time. And right now, it only represents a small fraction of the overall betting. The general public has shown that they prefer the traditional sportsbook model better. And then the professional bettors will probably gravitate over to the prediction markets. But once it becomes professional bettor versus market maker versus Wall Street hedge fund, the edges that all those guys seek are going to be reduced and gone. And so it'll be very small out. Now, for that to happen, California, Texas, my state, Georgia here, the other big states will need to legalize traditional sports betting and traditional sports books. So customers have a choice of whether they want the recreational model, which is the traditional sports book, or the more sophisticated Wall Street model, which is the prediction market. So ultimately, if I had to guess, I would say yes, prediction markets will continue and will continue to be allowed to offer sports markets. However, I do believe that the boom will kind of go down, and eventually will kind of replicate what the UK market is.
Do you think that, and I tend to agree with that assessment. Like, if I consider myself to be sharp, very, however low, I'm at the very low end of sharp. Even with that, if I want to bet Kyle Schwarber to hit a home run today, I'm just going to open DraftKings and bet. I'm not going to go looking plus 167 here, plus 173 there. I know that I should be doing that, but I'm not, right? And if I'm not, then no Jimmy down the street, certainly not. My buddy Bobby's certainly not, right? And so I feel like that the traditional sportsbook experience isn't going to go away for most people, much like you said. But do you think that Americans will take to betting on politics, take to betting on, Survivor, because these things keep popping up and they're in the news and they happen. Again, I feel the answer is no in the end. I just don't think it's going to catch on that way, which is why I think these companies are leaning so heavy into sports. But I don't even know if there's a question there. But take sports out of Kalshi, right? Is it still in business as far as you can see? Do you think Americans would engage in it?
No, I don't think they can make enough money. I don't think the volume on that type of events, maybe if you get the U.S. election, maybe that would be enough to carry some of it. People always estimate that that's way bigger than the Super Bowl would be for sure. But that's one event. Are they going to be able to make enough money on betting on Survivor, Game of Thrones endings, all those types of things? I don't see it. I certainly don't think that what was their evaluation? $40 billion the other day. Yeah, that ain't happening with just non-sports.
Again, going back to the journalism stuff for a second, for years, your competition were, basically us, at SBC, you kind of had this corner to yourself. But with prediction markets exploding, we're covering it. You're covering it as a gambling story. The Wall Street Journal and the New York Times is covering it because it is legally, technically, a Wall Street story. The competition, do you feel it at all? All of a sudden, you're going from competing with in-game to the Wall Street Journal.
No, yeah. And I will say that I felt that when sports betting was legalized in 2018, all of a sudden, it wasn't just touts covering it. It was everybody from you guys to Legal Sports Report. Those guys always did a good job. It always grew, and it grew into the mainstream. And it grew so much that ESPN has kind of assigned other people to help me. Hey, you watch the prediction market for Purdum. Make sure that, he knows that you handle those stories. So many betting scandals. They've got guys helping me with that. So that's how big the industry goes, that no longer is it not only just one guy covering it, it is multiple guys at ESPN, multiple reporters looking into all the industry.
Speaking about the scandals, again, your ear's been to the ground for a long time, and, you have the benefit of those 4 letters behind you. Do you think that these cases that have popped up are tip of iceberg stuff, and the end of it all has been going on? Have you heard whispers about this forever? To an outsider, And to a lot of media, these are scandals and this is the scourge of sports betting. To those on the inside, this is like, well, yeah, but this isn't the first time it's happened. And like, because it's legal, maybe we are catching the bad actors. And maybe the bad actors are going to think twice before doing this because now they're being watched. Which side of the fence are you on when it comes to all that?
I'm going to go positive, negative here. Positive are just what you said. Back in before legalization and widespread monitoring, some of these things were going on and we just didn't see them. There was millions and billions of dollars being wagered offshore with local bookmakers. And those people aren't sitting there, hey, we got some suspicious betting. Okay, let's call the FBI. That's just not something they're going to do. So I do think it's a positive because we're identifying it and it comes out and it acts as a deterrent, right, for future schemes. So that part. The negative, I am always concerned that these massive betting menus where you could bet on over under on Jonte Porter, who none of us know who he was before this betting scandal, almost provides an incentive for this to do that. Certainly, if you're going to allow big limits, I believe there was that one $80,000 parlay bet that one of the sports books was offering, and online it was Jonte Porter under rebounds, Jonte Porter under assists, Jonte Porter under points, whatever it was, and it was going to pay a couple $1 million if I remember correctly. What are we doing? Why would you ever accept a bet like that? Why would you ever? Now, the sports book ended up flagging it and didn't pay it out, and it led to part of this thing. But good Lord, if we don't even offer that type of limit on that kind of wager, do these people even attempt to do that? I don't know. So I think that, yes, it's great. We're monitoring, we're catching things, but let's make sure the betting menu and the limits that we're offering are not incentivizing people to try these types of schemes.
I'm asking about college sports, but before I do, I'm going to preface it with this. I have been, everyone in this business has said it one time or another, well, I'm a libertarian when it comes to all this, right? We've all said it. I was too when it came to all this. And I thought, kind of like put all the bets out there, bring it all above board, blah, 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 blah. And then, I thought the same for college. I'm not going to name the school, but I teach, it doesn't matter. I teach at a college. I've been teaching there a while, D1. And I had a few basketball players in my classroom at some point in the last, few years. And one of the guys, he was the starting point guard. And this is not like, it's a D1 school, but this is, low rung D1, And I said, ha, 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 how many times have you been asked to like miss a free throw or do something like that? He said about 4 or 5 times a week. I'm like, oh man, this is not great. This is not great. And so while the libertarian in me, right, it's like, people are going to bet this stuff. We have to have it out there anyway. So let's just bring it all above board. The human in me is like, this kid's 18 years old and this should not be happening. And if there was no betting menu for it, could it still happen? Has it happened in the past? Yeah, of course. But the incentive would be lessened, I guess. So now I'm coming down on the side and you almost want to whisper it because people are going to get angry emails. Maybe we should limit player props in college sports. I don't know.
I'm with you. I was the exact same way. Completely think that this was going to make it better. Sportsbook is going to do that. Legalization brings it aboard. Yes, I think this is the better way to go about it. 7-8 years later, it's really close. It's really close to whether this is a net positive. I think I would side that it is a net positive and we can learn from these things, but everything from the stuff you talked about, limiting prop bets to problem gambling, where we find a story about, gosh, the VIP host is incentivizing this kid to keep betting even after he's down so much and clearly showing signs. Those things are very, very troubling and disappointing. I thought the companies would act more responsibly in that manner, and it's unfortunate that they have not.
I think part of it is like we kind of forget sometimes that these are humans on the other end of the television, right? And like what I mean by like is this: if somebody came up to me and said, "Listen, man, I'll give you 50 grand if you say something nice about Purdum in your next column," I'd be like, okay. I mean, we're human, right? And, at some point, if somebody offers me enough money to go against my professional, whatever you want to call it, right? I'm missing a word here. Ethics. That's exactly the word I'm looking for. I'm going to think about it and probably do it, because I mean, listen, it is what it is, and we're all human, right? And so, and on the flip side of that, if somebody came to me and said, "Hey, listen, I heard that LeBron's going to miss his first free throw tonight," I'm not going to bet the house on it, but little birdies in my ear, of course, I'm going to like put a little money on it, right? Because this is, again, we are all human, and money talks, right?
Some of the bribes in the college thing surprised me. I think they said upward of $30,000. You're asking a low-level college kid, no NBA future, no pros, it's senior year, this is it. Not getting a lot of NIL money. It's very easy to understand how those kids got wrapped up in all that.
And, at the risk of stereotyping an entire, group of people, again, at the school I teach at, it's in New Jersey. Most of the students are from New Jersey. It's $50,000 a year. It's a private institution. These basketball players, I had a kid last year from East St. Louis. I got a kid from inner city Philly. They're here to play basketball, right? And when you're 18 years old, you have, literally $0 in your pocket. And, some guy in a Hawaiian shirt and a cap comes up to you and says, "Hey, buddy, miss a free throw, I'll give you $30,000. How do you say no to that?
Many of them did not.
I could probably continue to do not. So, yeah. One of my favorite tweets every month is your completely deadpan, no editorializing, no comment, note on Twitter on the table tennis handle in Colorado.
That thing is amazing. Millions. I think the last one was like $20 million in 1 month wagered just in Colorado on table tennis. And now that's a volume thing, right? There's so many matches throughout the day, 24/7. It started back in COVID, the popularity of this, because it was the only thing going on. That is incredible. And I've been told that while the volume may be a little different, it still ranks up there in other states more than UFC, sometimes more than tennis. It ranks higher than those per month. So it's incredibly popular.
Is the great, Eastern European ping pong scandal about to, come to our shores? I mean, how could it not?
We wrote about that during COVID and how, if you go watch these things, it's like a small room with blue tarps as the walls, and there's maybe a scorekeeper that has the little flip cards who flips over the score. And you don't hear any commentary, just back and forth. And so, yeah, I mean, there has been several, I'm sure, matches that were not on the up and up.
I mean, Borat, Sacha Baron Cohen couldn't come up with something as ridiculous, like I really have expected to show up there one day. Yeah, another thing you brought up just before is responsible gambling and things like that. What's your take on RG, the state of RG? Sometimes I think it's like this completely fugazi, like lip service. Other times I feel like they're probably trying. My problem with RG is I feel like you're trying to like high level physics. Like you try to, it's a wave in a particle, man. Because I've explained this I've probably written about this too. I can have $1,000 going on an NFL Sunday in DFS and betting, whatever. And I will 1,000% take a nap. Okay. If I play a 20-cent slot machine, I feel my heart starting to go, right? So how do you RG me? How do you figure? And so that's one person. And now we have this whole world of people. So I don't know. How do you feel like they're doing anything worthwhile in the RG space? Do you think it needs a complete overhaul? Is it worthless? Where are you on it?
Hey, I just had this conversation with higher up at ESPN, and I was like, every time I think they are trying something good, coming up with a new program or technology to identify people, I want to write about it. And then the next day, a newspaper story comes out about a VIP host incentivizing somebody or sending them dozens of text messages. Why haven't you been betting? Da, 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 da. And it's just really, really, really frustrating. So I don't know. There are people that I completely believe are very sincere at the companies. We have a responsible gambling person who tries to help with our coverage. And I know she is very sincere, and others as well. It's hard. It's really hard. It's really hard to write about. I grapple with the fact that it's still, the problem gambling rate is still less than 10% of people. So you're 9 out of 10, 99 out of 100 people, 99 or whatever it is, are fine. You and I, we would gamble responsibly. I bet so small. People wouldn't believe when I bet, and I don't bet that much, but it's like $25, $50 is a pretty big bet for me. And sure, I certainly lose, but that's disposable income. I don't play golf anymore. I barely go to the movies. If I want to have a beer and watch a game, and I like to look at the previews before, and I like to try to handicap, but That's part of it. But unfortunately, and I do believe there's some inevitability about this. I think people are predisposed, the way their brain is wired, to not to be able to handle the ups and downs that come with sports betting. And if they start gambling, they're almost certainly going to develop a problem. I also think, well, I'm sorry to ramble here, but I also think this is important. I think there are so many different levels of gambling addiction. We can look at Brendan Sorsby. Okay. He placed thousands of bets, bet on his own team when he wasn't playing, bet on school basketball, thousands of bets, but yet the stakes were really low. He kept it very low. I think the largest one reported was maybe $114, I think is what it was. There may have been some bigger ones in there, but he was able to keep that low and bet at a high volume, but kept the stakes low for 4 years, 5 years that he'd been doing that. The problem gambling is that the stories that you hear are the worst are the ones that spiral completely out of control, and they chase losses, and then they end up committing a crime to try to get their money back. And then also gambling addiction has a very high rate of suicide compared to other addictions. So I think, why Brendan clearly had a problem, he was making bad decisions. He was able to control things. He was able to not bet on certain things, not bet on games that he played in. And I think the fear is that when addiction really gets you, things completely spiral out of control. So that's another thing that I've been thinking a lot about during the Sorsby story.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about Sorsby in a second. The addiction angle, and it's the one thing is like the suicide rate that always gives me pause when I kind of go off against RG. Because you like the rates of drug addiction, alcoholism, shopping addiction, food addiction, you name it, is higher than gambling addiction, right? Nobody's telling McDonald's that they have to say you have to be 21 and over to eat a Big Mac, right? I mean, practice responsible eating, that's not a thing, right? But the suicide is such a stark reminder that this can turn so serious. And I'm guessing that the biggest reason is that it's generally hidden until it's not. If you're an overeater or an excessive shopper or a drug addict or an alcoholic, it's kind of impossible to hide for a very long time. Gambling addiction, you can hide until the last bet.
And that's going back to Sorsby. His agent told us just this last week that he had been with him, I think, since he got to Cincinnati. So for 2 years, he didn't find out until right around the NFL draft, right when the NCAA filed that Brendan had been gambling. So, it's called the hidden addiction and people can't hide it.
What do you think of the NFL's decision to forego the supplemental draft?
I think that it was the right decision. I think that Sorsby has been given bad advice throughout this thing. I think if he would have at the very beginning said, man, I'm very sorry for what I did. I'm going to focus on my mental health. I'm not going to sue anybody, not going to do any of these other things. There was a better chance that they would have let him in than there was now, because his attorney has been so aggressive. His agent has been so aggressive, pointing, I didn't Cincinnati say anything. The NCAA is not doing things right. And now NFL says, no, we're not going to have a draft. Well, legal action coming. You're going to sue the employer, your future employer, the people you want to work for. It doesn't seem like very good sound judgment. So I agree with the NFL, what they did. I hope that Sorsby focuses on getting healthy. He sounds like he's put in the work, and I've read his diagnosis, and it does meet the criteria of problem gambling. So we just hope that he can get things straightened out and maybe take a little bit of accountability and come out and get things turned around.
Again, going back to the journalism stuff, if you do something, if you're in the public sphere and you get caught doing something, the only thing to do is say, I did it and I'm sorry. Americans will forgive. The media will move on. When you keep it in the news cycle, that's when you are going to lose. I look at Bridgegate with Chris Christie. I didn't know anything about Bridgegate. Now, I like Chris Christie. I'm friends with Chris Christie. I still don't believe him. He knew. How do you not know? And people would forgive. I did not have sex with that woman. Yeah, you did. We would have forgiven. Instead of a whole generation now, if you say I did it and I'm sorry, Americans will forgive and the media will move on. I remember once at the Trentoni where I used to work, this guy, he had been imprisoned for accessory to murder. It was a big case when he was 20 years old, and he was released after 10, 12 years. And he gets arrested. I'm going to screw up the details, but he gets arrested for punching his girlfriend or something to that effect, right? And we write the story, And he calls the newsroom the next day. He's like, "This is bullshit. I didn't punch her. I choked her." Like, okay, we'll run a correction. Like this is, what are you doing? Just let it die. Let it die.
Let it die and take the responsibility.
The only thing with Swordsby that I don't like is that he broke rules. He's not an NFL employee when he broke these rules, right? And so I understand why the NFL has decided not to do it, but like I feel like he's being punished by the NFL for something. It's like slapping the dog with the newspaper the day after he shits the floor. Like I'm not sure that the punishment and the crime fit here.
Well, that's what they did to Terrell Pryor, right? He got in Claret, the violations that they committed in the NCAA, the NFL did punish them. So
that's a good point. I'd forgot about that. Okay, fair enough. This business is 24/7, 365. It never stops. Sports is the same, obviously, but like, the sports betting industry. Are you able to hang up your hat at the end of the day and say, I'm not thinking about this shit again until tomorrow, or is it impossible?
As a writer, in any writer in a fast-paced business, you're always thinking about your next story or how you get it. So no, I don't. Now, what does take my mind off? I think one of the only things, I'm a youth soccer coach, and I coach 12, 11-year-old girls at an academy level who are aspiring to play in high school. So I'm there. When I get out there with them, I don't look at my phone. And my company has been very gracious with my time. They realize that anyway, it's been a great life balancer for me. I've coached for over 10 years, and my daughter is now a goalkeeper at high school. So I started coaching when she was young and all the way through. I stuck in a lower age group just because you can be silly and kind of fun. But yet at the same point, these girls are getting competitive and they want to work and try hard. So it's a perfect life balancer for me.
Are you more Bill Belichick or Ted Lasso?
Ted Lasso by far. By far.
That's good to hear. World Cup's going on as we talk here. You're a soccer fan. I'm going to grab it. How do you feel? How have we done so far, us non-soccer fans, of catching on and getting involved?
Well, I would say that as my soccer fandom, I'm much more Ted Lasso as well. Still pick up little things. And that's how I watch it is as a coach, right? Oh, what are they doing there? And so forth. So that's my approach to it. I think the U.S. is doing fine. I mean, I think the betting handle is off the charts. People are betting tons of money on it and getting interested in it and having a good time. And of course, the U.S.'s early success has helped that. They play tonight. I don't know, we're posting this, but they play on a Thursday night, late at night against Turkey. And I'm an early, go to bed and get up early. I cannot stay up late anymore, but I'm going to try to make it tonight. So,
you brought up your daughter and we were talking about gambling, responsible gambling and all that. I feel like we're missing I feel like I have kids around the same age. I feel like we are doing them a great disservice by not having gambling be part of just like alcohol and sex and all that at the high school level. I feel like we're creating a generation of people that are just inundated with it without any knowledge to go with it, to the point where my son's 17 years old. And, I've said this before, I've sat him down numerous times. From the moment I realized who he was going to be, I said, listen, buddy, a couple of beers, it won't kill you. A bottle of Jack Daniels might. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
A little bit of weed's not going to kill you. Taking a few pills might. Be smart. Stick with, let's not get out of, when it comes to gambling, so far, this is what I've said to him. Don't.
I like that.
Which is telling in some ways, right? Because I don't feel like I have the tools or knowledge to be like, this is how you do it responsibly. Whereas I do have the tools and knowledge when it comes to weed and booze. Like, this is how you do it responsibly. I know Massachusetts has a pilot program going on where it's in high schools now, within like 30 high schools. New Jersey passed a law. They're not doing anything about it. Virginia, I think, is starting this school year with some type of thing. But I think it's more don't than this is how to do it responsibly. Do you think we owe like this generation something? Have you talked to your daughter about it? Like, where do you land?
I definitely think we owe this generation something. And North Carolina, add them to your mix. They're having a conference where they're going to be presenting a new curriculum from the problem gambling people there to high school teachers and so forth. So they're trying. And I do think you're right. This is the first generation that is growing up with sports books on their phone and being advertised to them over and over and over. In our years coming up, you had to go offshore or find you a local bookmaker to do it. And there was some friction there you had to get through. Now it's very, very simple. So I've been doing a lot of research and we're working on a big feature on youth betting. And the more I look at it, I think we almost should raise the age limit to bet. Right now, you can get 21, 18 to play on prediction markets and daily fantasy sites. Your brain is not developed at that point. It's still developing. Best diagnosis is 26 to 27 before you're fully developed. And when you're not developed, your brain cannot handle the dopamine rushes, the ups and downs you get. It's just not quite there to handle those. So you are way, way more vulnerable to developing some sort of addiction. Again, I am one that believes there are some people that are predisposed to it, that just, or if they start gambling, it's not going to go well. I remember the Chiefsaholic story. Chiefsaholic was a super fan for the Kansas City Chiefs. He had gone through a terrible childhood of his dad leaving and his mom being homeless and driving, living in their cars. And he started gambling. I think that when I heard that, I was like, that's just a powder keg match. Boom. And this is not getting well. Chiefsaholic ends up going on a bank robbing spree across the U.S. And we put guns in people's chests, number one. Every time I tried to start having sympathy for him, you'd hear that and I'd be like, okay. But I just use that as an example that if there are other contributing factors into someone's mental health, if you add gambling in there, it is a dangerous combination. So I would be an advocate for consideration of raising the age. And I know people like, well, they can go to war and they're 18 and this and this and this. So what? You know what? To protect them the best, I think you should be 25, 26 before you're allowed to bet.
You know, I covered the roundtable last week, the gamification of everything. It featured Matt King on it. I just wrote a column that's running, well, it'll be out by the time this is out, about how, and Matt King pretty much said it. He was talking more about prediction markets and such, but he's like, listen, if your product, and obviously Fanatics has their own, prediction market product, but if your product isn't gambling, but is gambling, like, it's time that like it has to like have the same guardrails as everything else, you know? And like I touched on in my column today about, I didn't know about this. I just discovered it. These companies like Arena Club and PAX, where you buy at a price point between $25 up to like $1,000, you're buying a slabbed, PSA graded card, but you don't know what you're buying. And then the wheel spins or the cards fly by on the screen, and wherever it stops, you win, you get the card. And if you can either get the card or they'll pay out like 80% of the market rate for it. This is the single most non-gambling thing I've ever seen in my life. But this is kind of, again, what our kids are growing up with. Everything, the Roblox game mechanics, baseball cards, like everything is a gamble, and nobody is talking to them about how to like keep your heads clean on this. And I worry about it. Like my son, he could be a senior in high school. He was out last night. He's like, Dad, I have some beer in the garage, just so you know. Like I know that he's going out and drinking beer. I trust him to drink a few beers. I don't trust him to join Calci next year.
I think that Matt's point that he said, if you're a not gambling product, I think that's so spot on. And I get irritated. We all got irritated, starting with daily fantasy through the sweepstakes, prediction marks. We're not gambling. Fine. Call it whatever you want. If you feel like you have to lie about your product to have success, that's for you. But if your product is shown to contribute to compulsive behaviors, addictive behaviors, you need to put the same protocols in place to help those people and prevent those people from doing it. Then the license companies, they say, yes, we are gambling and this is how we're doing it. Yeah, it's really, really frustrating. I don't care what you call it, but if your product contributes to gambling addiction, which any of those things you just mentioned certainly do, you need to act responsibly.
I mean, can you just imagine a world where everyone who has a product that kind of sort of like obviously is gambling stood up and said, all right, we're gambling. I mean, it's so silly that like all of us play in this fiction. All right, it's investing, it's baseball card collecting. It's not. To me, it's pretty simple. If you're putting money down with the anticipation and hope of getting more money back, that's gambling. Like, period, full stop, end of story.
If you're risking money on the performance of athletes, that is what you are doing, whether you're doing it at a prediction market, a sports book, or wherever.
Last question before you go, and maybe we should take this question offline. Maybe I don't want to get you in any trouble or nothing, but I got a kid. She's a Disney freak. Can you get me like cheap tickets, or how does that work?
I can, and I can say it publicly. We are allowed. We get tickets that we're allowed. I can't sell them. I can't take any gift for them, but I am. If you guys go to Disney, let me know, because it just kind of builds up in my thing, and I have tickets for you.
That's it. She's going to be very happy.
Just for you, though. Nobody else.
Don't worry. I mean, this is, as I said, maybe we should have taken it offline. I want the tickets. David, thank you so much for joining me today. Always enlightening. We're going to be doing this more often.
Absolutely, Jeff. You're one of my favorites. So keep up the good work.
Thanks, David. I appreciate it.